Um, I met Brian probably 10 years ago. Web developer, lives in the north, the Eau Claires, where, I don't know, it snows all the time. I don't even know how people, I think they need sleds to get around. Sorry if you live there. Illinois is worse, I promise. Met Brian, super passionate person. We have stayed in touch ever since. I wouldn't say necessarily our roads crossed based on geography and things we do. He's now at DigitalOcean, huge proponent in the community, super, super passionate about mentoring, getting people comfortable in doing those things. Has worked with the community and education for many, many years. Everything that he does, I think, is a model example of how we all should do and give back and do that. And so Brian and I have been working for the past few months on today. And so we're going to let Brian kick this off. He's going to tell his story, and then I'm going to come back up, and we got a few surprises for folks. So with that, let's give Brian a round of applause. I got him warmed up, and I guess we're over time. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We'll be perfectly fine. Everybody's comfortable, right? No. I need to hear a big woo, all right? Loud. Woo! All right, there you go. Now you're fired up.
Don't worry about it. You're fine.
So this session, this keynote, this is a conversation we're going to have throughout the rest of this conference, and it's about fighting fear. And before we get too deep, once again, the reason I'm here, the reason we're all able to do this thing, the reason you're here is these wonderful sponsors that we have. Please go visit their booths, get your badge scanned, talk with them, have wonderful conversations about the cool things they're doing. You'll get something out of it yourself. Plus, hey, it shows that, it shows love for the people who helped put this event together. So please give the sponsors a round of applause and go visit them after the breaks. All right, let's get started. We have a great job, right? I mean, we have the most amazing, interesting job. We get to create something from nothing. You don't need anything other than a computer at the public library to build something for the web. Think of how crazy that is. Think of all the opportunities that are available to us. We get to solve people's problems with code in air-conditioned rooms, right? Most of the time. I hope that's the case. But along with that, there's a little bit of this nagging doubt and this nagging fear in the back of our minds, right? There's a new framework. There's a new technology. There's something you just heard about that you want to be involved in, but you're too busy with something else, so you can't do it. And what if that's the next big thing? And what if? And then there is the Hacker News post about how GitHub is your new resume, and you better have some open source contributions if you want to get that great job. Or, your next interview is going to be a whiteboard problem that you better be able to remember those algorithm problems that you did in computer science class several years ago, right? So I'm not going to say how many years ago, but several years ago. So what do that's going to nag on you. And then, on top of all those things, what if you just don't fit in to what a computer scientist or software engineer is? What if there's that nagging doubt? I'm Brian Hogan. I'm a writer. I'm a programmer. I'm a musician. And I've spent a lot of time teaching people how to code. And I've learned a lot about fear and how fear gets in our way when it comes to learning new things. How it sets up roadblocks for us. How it changes our personalities and makes us disagreeable, terrible people sometimes. But this is not about me. This is about us and what we can do together to combat fear. And I want to start off by talking about the what-ifs, the big what-ifs for us. What are the big what-ifs for us? Well, this first what-if. What if I don't know something I'm supposed to know? I'm supposed to know this thing, and everyone says, yeah, I'm working on React. And you shake your hand and go, oh, yeah, I know what React is. I know all about React. Yes, that's a thing I know. because you feel you're supposed to know it, and you don't want to look silly in front of a bunch of people that are your peers, so maybe you play along. And, oh God, what if somebody finds out I don't know this thing? What if they find out I don't know? What if I become out of date and unemployable? Because the thing I've been working on for my company now gets acquired, and the thing that I'm working on is redundant now because they're going to bring in their own thing, and now I have to go out on the job market. And my 10 years of Java and Spring Framework, they're just not as marketable. All these people are getting React jobs now, and I don't really know much about that. But I know enough to know that Java is to JavaScript like car is to carpet. So I'm a little bit in trouble. What do I do? What if I make a mistake? What if I delete a bunch of records in the production database? What if I cost the company a bunch of money? How are they going to react? Are they going to be supportive? Or are they going to fire me? What if I lose my job? What if my family is depending on me for health insurance? Maybe I'm the sole breadwinner in our family because my wife has decided to stay home with the kids. Now I have to make sure that we're taken care of. How do I do this? What if the company gets acquired and they decide my whole job is redundant? What if we run out of runway and our company folds? What if I'm seen to be the person who's responsible for all of that? What if I miss out on an opportunity? I am busy working on old technology, keeping things running, doing that important work that we sometimes don't give enough credit to, that important work of keeping things going. What if, while I'm doing that, the company goes in a different direction? Companies face this all the time. They're busy focusing on one market, and all of a sudden they get blindsided by another. That tunnel vision. What if I miss out? Finally, what if I'm treated differently than other people? What if I'm treated differently because of my gender, my religion? What if I'm treated differently because of my nationality? On top of all the other things that I've mentioned, there are people who have to deal with that on a constant basis too. There are a lot of what-ifs, a lot of things that drive fear in our industry. And it's easy to brush them off, but I want to think about the cost of fear. You probably already have some ideas of what the cost of fear is for us, but it's more than mental, it's more than physical. First of all, if you're afraid, you can't make the right choices. You can't make decisions. You become paralyzed. You've all heard of analysis paralysis. There's so many choices. Things are so overwhelming. Now imagine that you're afraid to make the wrong move. Imagine that you're afraid the decision you make could cost the company money and could cost you your job. And it's easy to joke about these kinds of things sometimes, but there are people who are working on pretty important things. If somebody enters the wrong data into a decision algorithm, your health insurance premium will get declined. The tablet that the doctor and nurses are looking at, that was written by programmers who aren't doctors or nurses or have no idea about medicine. I hated my accounting classes when I was in college, but the first job, because the world hates me, the first job I had was working on an accounting system. But if you're afraid to make a decision, you're not going to be able to make a decision. And that can become incredibly costly. If you're afraid to make decisions, if you're afraid to make that move, some people are going to just kick the can down the road. They'll procrastinate it. I'll do it later. That's future Brian's problem. Yeah, well, I can't count the number of times I've said, damn you, past Brian. Can't count, lost track. But you think about the procrastination, right? You put it off because you're afraid of making the choice, you're afraid of making the decision, you're afraid. Well, now the deadline's coming up. The deadline didn't move, and now you're afraid you're going to miss that. It's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy with this. So what do? Do you do your best work? I don't think you do. Because if you couldn't make the decision in the first place, what makes you think you're going to be able to make that decision correctly 12 hours before the deadline? The other thing that can happen is irrational feelings. Paranoia. Worst of all, anger. It was too cliche. I was going to have the Yoda slide about fear leading to hate and hate leading to anger. But there's a little bit of truth to that. If you're afraid, if you're fearful of a situation, You might lash out with those feelings towards people. It starts out with just being, maybe a little stuck in your ways. You've been working on technology XYZ for a while, and all of a sudden the company's looking at bringing some new people in to work on a new technology ABC, whatever that is. And you're like, why would we do that? The outward appearance. That's stupid. Why would we do that? What we have works just fine. And then you think back to yourself years ago, wondering, how come that guy is all like stuck in his ways? Why wouldn't he want to get with the program, man? Use the right tool for the job, blah, blah, blah. But that person who's saying, why do we need to do that? Is it always pragmatic, or is it fear? That they're not with the technology. They don't understand what's happening. They don't understand what's going on. They're not up to date. And that fear then rolls over into anger when they're not getting the recognition that they need, or they're not getting on the project that they want to get on, and they start lashing out. One of the things that fear does to us is it takes the blood away from our brains and puts it in our arms and our legs and our cardiovascular system so we can fight or we can run. And that means we don't make the right choices. When we're angry, we don't make the right choices. When we're afraid, we don't make the right choices. Our judgment is clouded. And unfortunately, with the anger, when we finally do decide to make a decision, it might be a bad choice. It might be bad behavior. Lash out at our coworkers. We become that poisonous person in the meetings who's always shooting things down, or maybe we even go home and take it out on our kids and yell at them because we don't have time, we're too busy. All of this is driven by fear in a lot of cases. One of the worst ways that fear can manifest itself is something that Chad Fowler, the programmer and author, calls Stockholm Syndrome at work. It's the idea that you love your captor. Yeah, as bad as your job is, getting another one would be pretty hard, right? I mean, I got a mortgage, I got car payments, I got credit card debt, my kids are here, I don't want to relocate them. I haven't gotten a raise in 10 years, I'm not working on anything cool, but it's a job, right? And then that fear sets in. What if they're done with you? Where do you go? And it becomes really paralyzing and scary for people. And I hope there's nobody in here feeling like that. But if you are, there's ways to get out of it. Before we get into those ways, we've got a couple more things to talk about. As things progress, as you get more and more afraid and you try to fight that fear, you try to break through it, you start to get worn down. You burn out. You get tired of the constant thing, and then you don't feel you're worth it anymore. You don't feel it's worth it. You don't feel useful. You don't feel productive. You put in your time at work and you do the bare minimum, and then you go home and you crash on the couch and you binge watch several Netflix shows because at least that's fun. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe you get done with those shows and go, I just wasted a whole bunch of time. I don't feel good about myself. And you get depressed. And it's really hard to get through that. And I speak from experience. I've experienced burnout a couple times in my career, and it takes a long time to come back from. And I can point to every case that it all started. I can always pinpoint it back to being afraid of something, being fearful of something. On top of all these things, and there's a lot of costs, right? A lot of costs to fear. On top of all these health issues, the blood running to your extremities is going to mess with your brain, but it's also going to mess with your heart. There's all kinds of physiological issues that we can have. Stress causes headaches. Fear can cause high blood pressure, hypertension, all those wonderful things that we don't want to deal with as programmers because we want to be programmers for a long time because this is a cool job, right? This is fun. We want to be able to do it for a long time. And so you'll hear people occasionally say, a little bit of fear is good, right? I think I've given you ample evidence that fear isn't so great. If you're not careful, fear is going to get you. It's going to sneak up on you and get you. Like this slightly creepy clown. Okay, now I understand that for some people, clowns are scary and terrifying, okay? we're facing fear right now, but I want to make it up to you. So here are some pictures of kittens. Okay? And here's a basket of puppies. Okay? So, now we're all right back on the right track again. The fear's been taken away. We've replaced it. But that's the idea. That's what we're going to do. We're going to replace the fear. We're going to fight fear through understanding, and we're going to fight fear through action, and we're going to fight fear through community, through working together. And we're going to start by looking at understanding, because if we understand what fear is and we understand how our brains work, we can rewire our brains to fight fear. Now, I'm not an expert in mental health, but there are people who, beyond the things that we're dealing with here, they have other things they have to worry about. And so I have a couple of things I want to ask. The first thing I want to ask is that we join together and we recognize that good mental health is important. And anxiety and depression aren't just cop-outs. You're not weak. These people are not weak. They're dealing with something just as if you would deal with a stomach ache and you can't work. I want to ask us as a community to be able to do that. Second, I want to ask if you are dealing with anxiety and depression on a daily basis, that you get some help. And this wonderful organization, OSMI, Open Sourcing Mental Illness, has tons of resources for you, and it has tons of resources for all of us to explore so we understand this better. I don't want you to fight alone. I want you to work with the community, and I want you to know that if you deal with anxiety and depression, that your community is behind you. Right, everyone? Right? Everyone's behind you. There's enough for us to deal with in this industry without having to deal with that on top of it. For the rest of this talk, I'm going to focus on things that will apply to everyone. And I hope that there's something in here for every single person in the room. And I want to start with this. If you don't know something, you have an obligation to ask questions. So if someone talks about a technology today at the conference or tomorrow or any time this week, if you don't know what it is, don't pretend that you do. Ask. Ask the question. We learn through understanding. We learn by asking questions. If you're in a group meeting and someone says, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and you don't know why, ask the question. Not just for yourself. You think that you're going to be thought of as, oh, this person isn't paying attention. This person doesn't know what's going on. This person's out of the loop. I guarantee you there's at least 2 other people in that room who have the same question that you have. And if you ask that question, you are the one diving on the grenade for the rest of your team. You're the one saying, hey, could you explain that again? And the rest of your team will be so relieved that they didn't have to. I've seen it happen so many times. There's been times when I've walked out of meetings and other people have been whispering, did you understand any of that? No, I didn't understand any of that. What were they talking about? I have no idea. You're laughing because you've seen it. So you ask the question. Even if you know the answer, gosh, ask the question anyway. Think about how much of a confidence booster that will be for everybody else around. Wow, the person who I thought knew it didn't know it. Well, that's really cool. I feel better about myself. You got to give people the benefit of the doubt. They're going to feel good about these kinds of things. No one's going to judge you for not knowing stuff. Now, on the other side of that, if you are holding a meeting, if you're giving a conference talk, if you're in a group of people, please never say this. Never say, do you have any questions? Because it's the worst way to invite people. You could say, what questions do you have? Or you could go one step further and you could set the stage by saying, I'm going to leave the next 5 minutes for questions. And if nobody asks questions, you wait. You don't move on, you wait. You stand there and you wait. And I promise you it works because people don't like silence. You have to be strong. You may know the answers and you may want to give them out. But don't. Wait. Let people formulate the ideas in their heads. Because there are some people in the crowd, there are some people in any group who cannot think on their feet. It's not because they lack the intelligence to do so. It's the fact that they think differently and they need mental processing time to work these things out. They're the kinds of people who are an hour after the meeting going to have the questions. You have to give them time and quiet sometimes to process that. And by doing this little exercise where you say, I'm going to allocate this much time for questions right now, you build it in so it's not rushed. People can come with questions. They'll have some time to think about it. There's an exercise that actually happens in conferences and teaching all the time where it's called the think, pair, share exercise, where you're just given some time to think of something yourself, share it with someone next to you, and then share it with a larger group. And the reason those exercises exist is that some people in environments, whether it's the work environment or the learning environment, cannot think like that. They cannot do it. There's a little thing called acrasia that I've become familiar with recently. You know, there are people who procrastinate, chronic procrastinators. I may or may not be one of them. Cannot confirm or deny. But acrasia is this idea, it's a concept that we work against our own best interests. It's a problem with our will, and not everyone has this. Not everyone deals with acrasia. I think everyone does to a certain degree. But what it really is that you envision the future you. Maybe you're a student and you're going for a degree, and you envision yourself walking across the stage. You see yourself getting that diploma, and you see yourself getting that great, awesome job. Maybe you see yourself getting that promotion. Maybe you see yourself on a stage at a conference giving a keynote. And you see that perfect vision. Unfortunately, your brain is wired for instant gratification. I mean, there might be a lion behind you that's trying to eat you. And so evolutionary-wise, we've decided that it's more important to focus on the right now than the maybe later. And so your brain will get in your way. It'll say, you know, Game of Thrones is on. I can put the keynote off for a little bit longer. So what do? This is something that if we understand that this is an issue, if we understand that acrasia is an issue that we face, that we see the perfect future and we get in our own way, then we can start thinking about, well, what are ways we can avoid that? And we stop feeling so bad about ourselves. We stop feeling so bad, like, oh man, I'm just lazy. Why can't I get anything done? Well, the reason you can't get anything done, and it's this. And so it turns out the solution is called a commitment device. A commitment device. You know, Clark actually mentioned a great commitment device. He said that they would hold each other accountable by weighing in every day. That's kind of what a commitment device is. It's something that holds you accountable for your current actions. Maybe a swear jar if you're trying to quit swearing. But somebody else has to take the money from you. It might be a workout partner. One of the most amazing commitment device stories you'll ever find is from the author Victor Hugo when he was writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was given a sum of money, he was given an advance to write the book, and what did he do? He threw lavish parties. I've got this huge contract, let's celebrate, woo! And he kept procrastinating on actually writing the book. It didn't take very long for the publisher to say, hey, we need you to do something, we need you to deliver this book. And they finally got mad and said, you give us this book in 6 months or you give us the money back. And so he locked himself in his house and he got rid of all of his clothes. Can't have anybody over if you're naked. Well, you can, but they're not going to want to come over. You can't go outside because you don't have any clothes. So he locked himself in his house, got rid of all of his clothes, and ended up finishing the book. That's a commitment device. Well, we can all do that. We can all help each other and be commitment devices. There's a website called BeMinder that takes money out of your takes money from your credit card when you don't meet your goals. There's all kinds of ways to hack this problem, and I'm sure everybody in here can think of some really cool ways to hack this problem too, because that's really what it is. It's a mind hack. That's what a commitment device is. It's a mind hack. Another thing that we can do is understand how we learn. Learning can be a terrifying process, and we have to do it as software developers in order to stay current. There's always something new coming out. I'm excited to find out what the new framework will be tomorrow morning. There will be one, you can guarantee it. I'm excited to find out. I like learning, but I know that not everybody does like learning, and I used to hate it. The idea of sitting in a classroom used to frustrate me. The idea of sitting still for that long used to frustrate me because I'm not getting this fast enough. I need to get this faster. And then I understood how we learn. And there's a model for it called the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. It's how we progress through any set of skills. If you want to learn how to do woodworking, if you want to bake, if you want to program, when you acquire a new skill, you'll go through these stages. And the first stage I started is the novice stage. This is where you read books and follow recipes. I'm going to use baking as an example here. You have never made a cake before. So your first inclination is you're going to get a cookbook, and you're going to follow that recipe exactly. Exactly. You're going to measure everything because you want it to work. That's what a novice does. They follow directions. They follow tutorials. And it's incredibly important for these newcomers that what you're providing for them is accurate so that they don't run into any stumbling blocks along the way. And you can't be wishy-washy. You can't say, well, if we're doing React, we could use TypeScript, but we could also use that. No. Don't. Pick a way that works, target it at the beginner, let them be successful. By doing that over and over again, they'll progress to the next stage, which is the advanced beginner stage. And the advanced beginner stage is this wonderful place where you start breaking out of the recipes a little bit. Maybe you know enough now about React to go look at the API documentation and figure out how things work. You can start piecing things together. And that's a pretty powerful stage. If you're lucky, you get to immerse yourself farther and become somebody who is competent. And a person who's competent is able to start synthesizing multiple sources together. They can synthesize many different ideas. They know who the people are who know things about stuff. They're connected, yet they're still connected to the novices in a way that they still remember what it's like to be new. Occasionally, people at the competent stage they'll write books, or they will put libraries together for other people to use. Beyond that stage, if you are able to immerse yourself farther, you can progress to the proficient stage. Somebody who's proficient in a technology, for example, they're writing the frameworks. They're writing the deep, high conceptual tools that we're using on a daily basis. They're deeply immersed in these technologies, and they're able to put it to work. But look how much farther away they are from the novices. They're starting to lose a little bit of touch with the novices. Finally, the experts. And let me tell you, they're rare. It's way less than 1% in any discipline, according to the Dreyfus model. Way less than 1% of the people in an area are experts. An expert is the country doctor who can smell your breath and tell you you have strep throat. They don't need a culture, they just look at you. They work through intuition, which means they make pretty horrible teachers. If you've ever been taught by someone who's an expert, they can't tell you how anything works, they know it works. And it's not their fault, they're just so deeply immersed in it. They are the experts. You have to separate the experts from the pseudo-experts. You've all heard of imposter syndrome and Dunning-Kruger, right? A lot of people like to bring these things out. And I'm going to bring them out too. It's a little cliche, but I'm going to bring it out anyway. If you have something to share with people, don't let imposter syndrome get in the way. It's the feeling that you don't know things well enough, that you're going to be called out, you're going to be caught out of fraud. You don't let that get in your way. Share. Because the other side of that is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is where you rate yourself higher than you actually are. One of the neatest things about a self-assessment is getting a chance to see how you stack in your self-assessment, how that stacks against the assessments that your peers have given you. And what I've always believed is that symptoms of Dunning-Kruger, I'm so great, I'm awesome at this, those kinds of symptoms are actually symptoms of inexperience. Because when you don't know what you don't know, you think you know a lot of stuff. Imposter syndrome, on the other hand, happens at the beginning when you're starting out, but it also happens as you get more experience because, go look at something like Docker. Go look at that technology and start peeling away the layers and seeing what's actually under the hood. And you realize, oh my gosh, there's so many things I didn't know. I can tell you from my own experience, stepping into the classroom, teaching beginning programming for a while, there were so many things I forgot that I knew about programming and had to slow down and realize, wow, if statements are actually complicated if you've never written a program before. But if we keep these things in mind as we're learning about things, we can assure ourselves that it's all part of the learning process. And remember the Dreyfus model? I said the Dreyfus model, you have those 5 stages. You have the novice, the advanced beginner, the proficient, the expert. Where do you think most programmers end up on that scale? It's the second stage. They only make it to the advanced beginner stage. And the reason is because the job changes, or you have to go somewhere else and learn something new. We never get a chance to get that deep. So we got to cut ourselves some slack when we don't know all the stuff we think we're supposed to know. It's okay for us to not know everything. That's why we work with other people. That's why we work in teams, so we can play off of each other's strengths. We don't have to know everything, and we don't have to pretend we know everything. We can work together in our teams and accomplish pretty amazing things. Now, in order to accomplish those amazing things, we have to fight fear through action. We have to take action. Going to a conference is awesome. That's the first step. Learning about some new things that you're going to put to use. But sitting through a conference talk, listening, maybe taking some notes, and then going and getting some coffee, talking to some vendors, then going to another conference talk and sitting and listening to someone while taking notes, that's not action. That's not even learning. That's just being told about stuff or hearing about stuff, and that's cool. But if you really want to get rid of the fear about stuff, you build it through confidence. You gain that confidence through deliberate practice. When you're working throughout the day, maybe you can steal a buddy as a commitment device and say, hey, let's the two of us spend a half an hour each day over lunch working through a Pluralsight video, and we'll work through these things together, and we'll write the code, and we'll peer review each other's code. We'll practice, we'll do drills. If you're practicing a musical instrument, for example, if you're practicing, you're going to practice your scales, you're going to practice your technique, and you're going to do that in private. And then when you get up on the big stage to perform, consider that like your job. That's your performance. Your company would really prefer you not practicing on their production code base. But we do that. We do that. We're learning as we go. And that's why we're afraid to make changes to the code base. That's why our code bases are a lot of times a house of cards we're afraid to touch. Because we know. We know because there was a deadline. And it's not our fault. We could push back a little bit. Or we could push back towards our managers and say, we need time to practice our skills. Now, our industry loves to give feedback in terms of snarky pull requests and comments like, "Oh, that code sucks. Why would you ever do it that way?" Well, it's not a good way to work with people. But getting feedback is how you learn. It's one of the most crucial parts of feedback. Has anyone ever written a paper for a college class or even a high school class where you put all this effort and all this work into it, and all you got was a letter grade with no comments? Everybody's probably had that experience at least once, and it's horrible because you don't learn from that. Have you ever had a performance review where they said, everything's great, move on? It's because that person didn't take the time to prepare any feedback for you that was meaningful. They just want you out of their hair so they can get on to the next 100 performance reviews they have to do because they are under deadlines too. But we learn by getting feedback. You can watch all the workout videos you want, but nothing is a substitute for having a personal trainer showing you that your posture is wrong. And the same thing works for your code. If you follow Pluralsight videos, if you follow the code through a book, and then you go write your own thing, maybe get somebody else to look at it and give you feedback on it. Honest feedback. Not mean, I'm going to try to cut you down and make myself feel good feedback. But honest feedback like, hey, you could do it this way. And if you're giving feedback, please stop saying you're doing it wrong. It's not helpful. What is helpful is, you know what, I might do it this way. And here's why. Just that simple change of phrase as a suggestion. When I give feedback to my peers, it's almost always a question. What if you tried it this way? What if you did this instead? It's that way that the onus is on them to act on it. It's not me telling them to do it. You can provide feedback to other people, and you can solicit feedback on your own stuff. Because if you're afraid of the code review, cut that off early. Get feedback as you go. Then the code review is easy. Then you have more confidence, and you're less afraid. If you combine that with the Dreyfus model, you put the practice into place, you're way more confident in your skill set. And you're way more confident to learn something new now, taking the same learning pathway, the same knowledge that you did in the previous stuff. There have been many times when I've been trying to learn a new programming language that I have just put the code on the internet and said on Twitter, hey, what am I doing wrong on this? Please give me some feedback. People are so helpful. They are so helpful. Do that. Take advantage of it. Get feedback from strangers or your friends. Doesn't matter. Get feedback so you can improve. Now, one of the things that comes up a lot is, okay, I don't have time. I don't have time to learn things. I don't have time to learn new things. I would imagine that for many of us, that's not entirely the case. I think for many of us, it's a priority issue. I'm reasonably confident that most people can find a half an hour a day to practice. Maybe you steal time from lunch. Maybe you get up a half an hour earlier. But imagine what happens if you take a half an hour of your day and put it towards some deliberate practice. Not watching a video, but a deliberate practice of some code or some technique. Over the course of a week, you've accumulated 3.5 hours. Over the course of a month, you've accumulated quite a bit more than that. It adds up incrementally. Take a calendar, put it on the wall, X off each day. Try to get some chains going of how many days you've practiced. Treat your job like you treat a musical instrument or any other hobby and invest some time practicing in it. You can probably find that time. I found that by watching one less TV show a day. That's what I did. I'm not saying don't watch TV. I'm not saying don't spend time with your kids. I am absolutely saying get away from that computer and do some hobbies that are fun and rejuvenate yourself. Don't spend all weekend locking yourself in your office learning a new technology. That's missed out time. Instead of spending the whole day Saturday doing it, take a half an hour each day and you'll be much healthier and much happier. Now, with that said, I really don't want to put everybody in the same bucket because there are people who really do not have time. They've got a sick person at home to take care of. They're a single mother or a single father. They've got the kids to pick up. They've got after-school activities for the kids. They've got their church group. They've got all kinds of other obligations pulling them in so many different directions, which causes stress and fear because now they know they can't dedicate things to their job. They can't dedicate the skills they want to the thing that makes them money. And every time someone says, oh, you have time, they go, I don't. And they feel worse about themselves, and they feel they're being judged in an industry that seems to demand your personal time be put towards the professional goals of other people. You will learn on your own so that you can build product for me. How would you feel if you're in that situation? What do you do if you're in this situation? You work with your manager to build a professional development plan. You figure out a way with your manager. You come to them and say, I want to put together a professional development plan that helps me learn these things so that I can put them to use towards this company goal. Your companies all have goals. They all have quarterly goals or yearly goals, whatever. You find out what those are by working with your manager, and you put together a plan. Because once you have that plan, then you can go to conferences that support that plan. You can get books that support that plan. You can get time to support that plan because it's a plan. It's part of what you're working towards. You're not just working to get a paycheck. Any company worth its salt is going to do some sort of professional development. And if they won't, it's time to start looking for ones that will. But I hope that there are some managers in the room that are going to be willing to help get on board with this idea and help people develop their skills on the clock so that they can spend their off-the-clock time doing something with their families. And this is where it comes in that we can work together to solve these problems. For the managers in the room, please work with employees on those professional goals, those professional development plans. Hold one-on-ones. Please don't skip the one-on-one because your calendar is so busy and so packed. If you're a manager and you're skipping one-on-ones with your employees, that's something you should bring up with your manager, with your boss, and say, I've got too much stuff to do. I can't give my employees the care that they need. I can't do it. I need help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Fight for diversity and inclusion. There are lots of people working in organizations who worry that they're the only person like that in the room. And that creates a lot of stress, a lot of fear that they're going to say the wrong thing. There's a lot of talk about diversity. Let's bring on more women. Let's bring on more marginalized groups. But there's not a lot of talk about inclusion it's best if you're a manager to look at not just who you're hiring, but look at who's leaving. Look who's leaving the company and why are they leaving the company. Those are important things to think about. Are people leaving because they're afraid? Are people leaving because they're not being treated fairly? How are they being treated? Why are they leaving? Understand those things so you can then invest in the employees that are there. To everyone here, not just managers, to everyone here, model the behavior you want to see. That's what I said earlier. Ask a question in a meeting. Even if you know the answer, ask the question. Let other people see how easy it is. If you're walking around the halls at this conference and you see someone standing by themselves, go talk to them. Someone standing by themselves at a conference, if they're looking at their phone, maybe they're checking an email, who cares? They're in a public space at a conference, you get to interrupt them. Sorry. If they want to be left alone to answer their emails, there's plenty of places for that. But they're at a conference, the chances are that they're doing this because they're anxious, they're afraid, they desperately want someone to come up to them and talk because they're afraid to go start that conversation. You can help them by talking to them. You can help people by not standing in circles with your friends at a conference. You can leave the circle open for other people to join. That little act of modeling that behavior will help so much. Don't sit with your friends at lunch or breakfast. Sit by yourself at a table and let people come to you. If you're the nervous person, if you're a little bit afraid, do that. Sit at a table by yourself. Get a little bit early. People will come to you and introduce themselves. I've seen it happen time and time again. Model the behavior you want to see. Do it everywhere you can. It will help people be more confident and comfortable around you. When people look up to someone, they model that behavior. They will take on that behavior. If you have a really, I've seen it. If you have a sexist manager, everyone on the team is going to end up being that way. Model the behavior that you want to see, and things are going to be a lot easier for everyone. Next, I want everyone to lend privilege when you have it. This is a little tough one to say, but I got to tell you, here I am at a tech conference. I'm a white guy at a tech conference. Everybody assumes I'm a programmer. But I have been standing next to women who've got so many more years of programming experience than I do, who are so much better at writing code than I am, and somebody will ask them, hey, are you in HR? Or, oh, you must be a designer. Don't do that. Lead by example. The best advice I can give is walk up to someone and say, hey, I'm Brian, I write Ruby code. What do you do? That's my thing. I'll say, what do you do? Because if they say I'm a snowboarder, I'm like, that's cool. If they say I write ASP, I'm like, that's cool. If they say they write COBOL, I'll scratch my head for a second and go, that's cool. But there's lots of places you can lend privilege, right? Imagine being look around your situation. Look around your situation. Could you imagine being in a room where nobody else looks like you? And how uncomfortable that would be and how much fear that would be? Could you imagine being in a meeting where you have a great idea and no one will listen to it? If somebody brings up an idea in a meeting and you think it's a good idea, don't nod. Say it. Restate their name. I think Jess has a great idea. We should move forward with that. And if someone tries to steal credit for someone's idea, stand up and say, I love that you and Jessica have the same idea. I love that. You should work on that together. This is just a small way that we can lend our privilege to other people. We can lift people up as a community. It's really scary to put yourself out there. I've talked with other men in the industry who are afraid to jump in sometimes because they're afraid for their careers. I have seen people, I've even done this myself. I've heard about a sexual harassment claim somewhere, and I've said, well, let's get all the facts first. And then I realized, no, that person who's making that claim has way more to lose than I could possibly imagine. Because now, when someone Googles their name on a future job search, they're going to be associated with that forever. And there are employees and employers that will use that to discriminate against someone on a job, whether it's legal or not. Lend privilege, help people, lift people up. Please, join me in doing that. I am not afraid to put myself out there if somebody else isn't showing love to somebody. I'm happy to do that, and I'm proud to do that. I'm proud to make trouble for people who aren't showing love. Another thing that you can do to help others fight fear is to share. Blog. Write something on Medium, write something on your own blog. Talk about what you're learning so that other people can see it as an example. You can be an example to other programmers who are coming up every single day. I can't count the number of things I've learned from other people's websites just by reading what they've wrote. Oh, I had that problem. I've had a couple of situations where I've solved my own problem by finding my own blog like 5 years later. Oh, that recognized that. Oh, yeah, that was me. Okay, cool. But you share. You could get involved in creating a meetup. Is there nobody in your town working on Elixir? I love Elixir. It's one of my favorite new programming languages. If there's nobody in town doing that, start one. If only one person shows up, you can sit there together and talk about how awesome Elixir is. And if nobody shows up, great. You can watch some Elixir videos on YouTube and take notes. It's time you blocked out for deliberate practice, right? But one of the neat things is if you use like Meetup, then Meetup can tell other people about your group. They can advertise your group to other people, which helps drive the numbers in your group. It helps get the visibility that you need. That's super helpful if you're trying to start something new. But do that, because if no one else is doing it, why don't you do it? There's got to be somebody else. Just like answering the question in the room, there's got to be somebody else who has the same desire that you do. You can find that commonality and you can work together. Maybe they're afraid to do it. Maybe they're afraid to put in the time. You can put in the time. Start a user group or meetup, right? And participate in open spaces. Open spaces is going to be kicked off today, and it's so cool. You don't have to be an expert in something. You don't have to be the knower of the knowledge. You can just be someone who just sits there and facilitates the conversation because you want to learn. I want to learn about how companies are doing stuff with Agile. So maybe I'll set up an open space session on how companies get stuff done with Agile and how they do estimation. And everyone will come together and they'll talk about how great it is. And I will be able to go back to my job with a lot more confidence because I've talked to other people who are having successes. And it was all because people came to that, and it was all because somebody set that up. Be that person that sets that up. Be that person that causes that ripple effect in the pond for everyone else. Be that person. Share. You have something to share. You absolutely do. Don't let the imposter syndrome get in the way. You absolutely have something to share to somebody else. Whether it's in a hallway conversation, whether it's in an open space, whether it's on your blog or answering questions on Stack Overflow. You have something to share. Be an example. Advise or teach. There are a lot of colleges looking for adjunct instructors. Just take a class. If you're tired of what the computer science curriculum is doing at a college, almost every college has an advisory board you can get on. Because the programs are a lot of times driven by what the community needs and what the surrounding businesses need. If the computer science department is teaching Java, there's a really good reason for that, and it's because the people who get hired from that computer science program are using Java in the workplace. If that's not something that you agree with, get involved in the advisory committee and help steer the ship for that next generation of programmers. It's actually a lot easier to get involved than you think. It's harder and harder for colleges to run these days by hiring full-time faculty, so they are turning to adjunct. You can find jobs where you can teach adjunct online. There are lots of ways to get involved and lead people in the direction you want to lead them in. One of the coolest things I've ever done with my life is teaching new programmers how to program. One of the most rewarding and crazy experiences ever, and I would recommend it to everyone who has the passion to do that, who wants to make a change. Because I can look out in the crowds and I can see some of my former students. I can see them, and it's really cool. Finally, you can mentor. You can mentor people. It's not just I tell you what to do when you're a mentor. It's a relationship. It's forming a relationship that eventually becomes a two-way street. You can say to people, I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to open some doors for you, but we're going to work together. We're going to work together to help both of our careers. If I'm helping you learn JavaScript, for example, I'm going to be able to provide ways that I've failed. I'm going to be able to provide advice. I'll be able to provide feedback to you. But eventually, you'll go on and you'll learn React, because I'm working on Angular. And when you learn React, you'll be able to teach me things. You'll be able to teach upwards, and it becomes this relationship. And it becomes unbalanced at the beginning and becomes more balanced as the relationship goes on, as you both gain experiences in different places. And it's incredibly rewarding. I've had the opportunity to mentor many people in my career, and I consider it to be one of the most humbling and amazing things, because you have no idea what you don't know when you try to explain it to somebody else. You think about the things we take for granted, how our minds work. It's like, what's your phone number? And you have to stop for a minute because you never call yourself. It's the same sort of thing. You don't have to know how these things work anymore because you learned them years ago. Now when you're working with someone new, you have to know them again. You have to know them deeply again. And it will help you rethink how you think about things. You will relearn things that you've forgotten how to learn. It's an incredibly wonderful and rewarding experience. I want everybody in this together. Everyone together can make a difference. There's work we have to do on our own. There's work that individuals have to do on their own. We have to understand fear so we can replace it with confidence. We have to take action and do deliberate practice and take deliberate action using things like commitment devices to avoid procrastination. We have to do those kinds of things. We have to make time. We have to make time somehow. Because if you say I don't have time, you do have to remember one thing that's really important. One of my favorite books is a book called Land the Tech Job You Love by Andy Lester. And Andy Lester is actually here at this conference. One of my favorite books, and there's a section that stood out to me so much when he said, you are the president and CEO of You and Your Family Incorporated. Every decision that you make has to be related to that. Yes, you may work for a company, but you're still working for you and your family. You have to put in the time. You have to reach out. And then as you gain the ability to, as you gain the confidence, as you gain the privilege, pay it forward, help other people. Help one another. And together as a community, we will do amazing, amazing things. Thank you. I want to bring Clark back up.
Thank you, sir.